And we are live. Okay, so hello. Welcome to Not Story Time. So what we're gonna do today is not a story time. I know I haven't done a story time in God knows how many months, but today we're gonna do something a little different. So because finals and all those papers that you do in college are taking the wind out of my sails, we're gonna spice it up a little, and today we're going to make Brad upset because I won't write my reviews of the newest issues of Amazing Spider-Man. I'm going to talk about them because I'm a moron. And part of the reason I'm doing that is because I just have been really burned out writing recently. So this is my way of doing my reviews and also getting to use my YouTube channel for once every 5 years. And yeah, so today we will be talking about ASM or Amazing Spider-Man number 18, 18.HU, and number 19. And to begin, we'll do a recap of Spencer's entire run and then hammer through those 3 issues. And then hopefully I've got a guest coming on soon, maybe. I don't know. He's in Australia or wherever. But to begin, the newest writer for Amazing Spider-Man is Nick Spencer. And he's been doing a run since 2018, June of 2018. And or is it July. But he's been doing it with Ryan Ottley and Humberto Ramos. They've actually been doing pretty good on art. So to begin, the run basically has been 16 issues of course correcting. Peter has gotten back together with Mary Jane. He's lost his job at the Bugle, which admittedly I didn't like that little bit. But his doctorate was revoked, and now he's living with Randy Robertson and Boomerang. And so there was an arc. The first arc was basically Spencer giving Dan Slott the middle finger and course correcting everything. And so Peter got himself divided into a Peter Parker self and a Spider-Man self and fought the Tri-Sentinel. And it was revealed that Taskmaster and Black Ant are working for Kraven the Hunter. And so after a couple of, not necessarily filler arcs, because I don't want to say they're filler, but they're very important character arcs for Peter as opposed to plot-based ones. And so Peter and Boomerang have a night out of the bar with no name, and then a bunch of superhero stuff gets stolen, so Peter just teams up with Black Cat in order to get all this stuff back. And let me get a light here. And so in the background, we've been seeing an arc with Kraven the Hunter. We haven't figured out, it's been kind of boiling in the background since issue 2, but it didn't get revealed until issue 5 who the main culprit was. And in issue 5 was revealed that it was Kraven, and in issue, I want to say 13 or 14, is when the plot really started kicking into gear. And so, to recap issue 16 of Amazing Spider-Man, Kraven the Hunter has had the High Evolutionary clone him 87 times to create some clones. Hey Shogun, how you doing? And only one of them has survived because he killed the rest. Because, you know, what's the term for killing your siblings? You don't kill your siblings. That's just, But regardless, he and Arcade hired both Taskmaster and Black Ant, who are probably one of the best parts of this book, to capture every single animal-themed villain, with some exception, because there's so many animal-themed villains that I don't even think Spencer, as good as he is at continuity, I don't think even he can properly nail down every single animal villain. So you got the iguana, the rhino, scorpion, tarantula, Stegron the dinosaur man, vulture, the gibbon, white rabbit. He's taken all of these animal-themed villains and put them in cages because he believes they are not worthy of taking on the mantle of the animal they're representing. And at the same time, he's been recruiting Facebook hunters, poachers, who are just killing animals for sport rather than the honor of and tradition of the hunt. And so he's gathered them all, and he's using Black Cat as bait. He also brought, and Billy Connors, who's a lizard boy now, which was explained in the Clone Conspiracy. He brings in Spider-Man, and then in issue 17, Craven lures Peter to his yes, Craven is Thrag Shogun. But he lures Spider-Man to his shipping boat, I believe, and then he knocks him out, and then he doesn't knock him out, his Craven Jr. does. Because it is essentially just a clone of Craven. And so Craven gets the upper hand, both because Peter has a fever, and it's been well established at this point that when Peter has a fever, his powers pretty much get taken out. So I'm not a fan of seeing Peter lose so often, but I didn't mind it here because Spencer established a reason for why Peter was handicapped. Not to mention that Craven's shtick is pumping poison gas or pumping gases of different kinds to take down his prey. So I didn't necessarily mind that. I thought it was actually okay in this situation for Craven or Craven Jr. as is, to beat Peter. And so Craven uses a piece of technology from Secret Empire, the Planetary Defense Shield, which is actually, I thought, a really good way of bringing back some of his stuff from his infamous Hydra Cap run, and uses it to create a little barrier around Central Park. And he has Craven Jr. swap Peter into his black suit, which I actually thought was a pretty good piece of parallel to Craven's last hunt on Spencer's part. And he puts them all in this arena, per se. And they get their bearings and they fight each other, but eventually it's revealed that they're getting hunted down by Craven-themed armor. And so that kind of leads us into today's issue. So today's issue, or today's 3 issues. And the first issue we're going to cover is Amazing Spider-Man number 18 with the legacy number of 819, written by Nick Spencer and illustrated by Humberto Ramos, Victor Olazaba, and colored by Edgar Delgado and Eric Arsenija. So the issue begins with it has a parallel narrative structure, and it goes between the Centipede Demon Man that Spencer's had building up in the background for a while now, and Peter. And so Peter is running away with all of the other animal-themed villains, and they're escaping they're trying to get away. So Stegoron decides to fight them head on, while the Beetle opts to run away, but they can't because the Planetary Defense Shield is up. And so, after a bit of recap, it's revealed at the Plaza Hotel that Arcade is running not necessarily running the whole show, but he's the one entertaining their guests. And so he has them use VR headsets that are connected to the cerebral cortex, and they make sure very specifically that it is revealed to be the cerebral cortex. That once they enter their credit card information, they can customize their hunter armor to be however they want. It's completely modular, and you can customize it aesthetically or arm it however you want. And so the one fat Bob guy who has been established, I think, since ASM number 5 as sort of like one of the poachers, he tires it out, and he fights. His first target is Iguana, and so what he does is he summons up a club and he literally kills Iguana. So press F for Iguana. As Mark would put it, he taught us love, or as I would put it, press F for lizard for iguana. He taught us that being a C/D list supervillain does never ends well in an event book or a major spider title. And so it cuts back to Peter, and he is running away and with the rest of the villains. And it's more recap. And so in the last issue, like I said, Craven Jr. got the upper hand on Peter by pumping hallucinogenic gas into the shipping boat that's Peter was looking for Black Cat and Billy in. And so the hallucination that he saw was one of Mary Jane on the floor, covered in blood with glass shattered. And it cuts back to Mary Jane, and she's dancing and trying to figure out what's going on. And it's more of an inner monologue on her part about how she deals with her stress. And she goes into more detail about how it's trial and error, and she dances her problems away. And so she gets on her phone and goes to, I guess, CNN or whatever the Marvel equivalent of CNN is, that the barrier is around Central Park. And so I don't remember who said it, but there was one guy who completely flipped about Captain Marvel being in this page. And I understand it to a point, because it's Marvel, and Captain Marvel had a movie coming out around the same time. So I can understand like being frustrated that Captain Marvel's making a cameo and everything. But I will go out on a limb, and I will be devil's advocate for this, because in the context of the technology they are using in this specific scene, Captain Marvel is probably the person who makes the most sense to be speaking about it. Because for those of you who didn't read Secret Empire, I know a lot of you either didn't read Secret Empire, or you read Secret Empire but didn't read the tie-ins. And in that book, Captain Marvel was trapped outside of the planetary defense shield by Hydra Cap, and was stuck between a Chitauri wave, which was supposedly bigger than the Annihilation wave, but it felt like it was more just hyping it up, because nothing can really be physically bigger than the Annihilation wave. And so canonically in universe, Carol spent weeks up to, I believe, a couple of months trying to bring this thing down. And it took Quasar killing herself to bring the thing down. And at this point, with the Guardians split up because of Infinity Wars, and most of the other, I think Spectrum is in Avengers No Road Home, and then Blue Marvel is off doing whatever he does when he's not on a team book. Carol is probably the one person with the most experience in this technology and how to bring it down. And she even says that it won't be easy for her. So in this context, I think it makes the most sense. But MJ sits at the window side worrying for Peter, and it cuts back to the hunt, where you see I think that's Constrictor, Gazelle, I believe. The problem with Ramos' art is that it's very busy, so you can't really tell what's going on. But a bunch of the villains die, and Peter goes out of his way to save the Gibbon. And at this point, the Vulture comes in and slashes one of the Craven bots, grabs its head, and he takes off with Gibbon, because the Vulture appeals to his better nature, or not necessarily his better nature, but appeals to his sense of survival. And so the Gibbon runs off, and then Peter gets blasted away. So another compilation of villains getting chased. I did think it was kind of weird that Toad of all people was here, but it makes sense. But as a member of Mutant Kind who has fought Sentinels on the daily, this is probably just a Tuesday for him. This is nothing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he made it out alive. And so we cut to Taskmaster and Black Ant, who are discussing how they're gonna spend their money because they probably got paid a large fortune by Craven just to hunt these guys down and put them behind a energy fence. And so in a shocking twist that I hate Mark for calling this, but he was right like 100%. The Taskmaster double crosses Black Ant. Press F for one of the best parts of this comic. They were so good together. I'm gonna even go to the comment into the live chat and I'm gonna put an F in there just for y'all. And so Taskmaster leaves, and he asks Arcade to open one of the gates. And it cuts back to the Vulture and the Gibbon who are running away. And Vulture, instead of helping him, betrays him and tosses him to the pack of wolves, essentially. And it cuts back to, and it's really sad just because it's expanded on in the Point HU issue where they focus on Gibbon specifically. But it is kind of depressing to see that happen. It cuts back to MJ. The last couple of pages are MJ centric, which I know which I know Chi Town will love, but it cuts back to MJ and she wakes up and she finds a centipede in her hair, which is mildly depressing. Well, not necessarily depressing, but it harkens back to the time when she killed a rat to out of stress for Peter being, I think it was during Craven's last hunt. And MJ, in a show of sympathy, sings Closing Time by, I think, Semisonic and lets it go. And so you get a little voiceover saying, look at that compassion, kindness, and mercy. Maybe it's not all bad out there. And then the last page is the Centipede Demon Man sitting over MJ while she's asleep. But I don't want you to worry, Pete. I promise you I'll keep an eye on her while you're gone. And that closes out the issue. So grade wise, very solid. I don't want to give it an A because the last issue was an A plus. I'd say I'd give it either a B plus, A minus. The things I thought were very strong. It wasn't necessarily action heavy, but it was action heavy, but it wasn't like I'm just gonna have Peter hit everything. It mostly was Peter on the run and on his back foot. I think part of the problem was that it spent too much time on recaps. But I would probably settle down on an A minus. The problem is that I didn't like how Taskmaster betrayed Black Ant, mostly because while it is in character for Craven, or not Craven, but for Taskmaster, I don't know. I kind of felt like their camaraderie was going to appeal to Taskmaster's better nature and not have him betray him. And that might just be because I think that Taskmaster and Black Ant are two of the most consistent characters Spencer writes. They were a shining part of excellence in his Hydra Cap run. And also they were pretty good in the Secret Empire. So it's a bit depressing / upsetting that Taskmaster just kind of casually betrays Black Ant. But I'm willing to live with it just because it's in character for Taskmaster, I think. I'm not very well versed in Taskmaster, but there was a point where he killed Batrock's daughter, and Batroc just shrugged it off because, it's good for business. So, in this context, I think it works. I did enjoy seeing Ramos draw the black suit. Not the one from Slash Run, because God, that was trash. But the regular black suit, I think Ramos actually nails down. Ramos in general actually did pretty well here, I think. there's a few panels, particularly the MJ bits where she's dancing, that look really weird. But other than that, I don't think there was anything too out of place for a Ramos issue. This I mentioned this on the Crawl Space podcast that or I think it was Zach who brought it up, and then we expanded upon it, that Ramos works better when he's not on a deadline. This doesn't feel like deadline Ramos. This feels more like Ramos when he has time to actually get things done. Because you can tell when Ramos is on a deadline. When if you look at Superior and Champions, that's when he's at his worst. But this is probably not necessarily him at his best, because I think he's probably done better. I can't name anything specific on the top of my head, because the majority of his career has been Spider-Man. But aside from like there's a couple of pages where there's some classic Ramos examples of disproportionate limbs and overly large chests. But I think that for the most part, he's doing a fine job. I think that Otley probably would have been the better choice to do this kind of story arc, but I understand that his art takes a long time. I did like how they're not just killing off villains left and right. There is certainly a casualty list, but not a huge one. They're killing off enough villains to make it feel like there are stakes ahead, but not enough to make it feel like they're just ultimatuming the villain lineup. Because you got to have the West Coast Avengers fight something. So it can't, and you gotta have something for Spock to fight over in San Francisco. So you can't just kill all of them off, but they're killing off enough to make it feel like there's actual stake and investment in this story. Iguana, I feel bad for him. Then again, what did you think was going to happen? So we've got Iguana, Mad Dog, Mandrill, and Gazelle as our main fodder. And I think Manbold is present in this issue. Yeah, Shogun made a good point in the live chat that it isn't Heroes in Crisis or the DC meat grinder. It feels very much like they are pacing themselves with how many people they kill. I know people who enjoyed Hopeless's Spider-Man are going to be upset because I think they killed off Porcupine. Rip. Solid characterization for MJ. I like that they got into her head for a bit and allowed her to have some internal monologue. Especially considering the parallels to Kraven's Last Hunt and how she killed a rat. She showed not necessarily progress, but she's learned to cope with her stress. And it shows when she treats the centipede with kindness, I guess. Shouldn't have done that, though, because Centipede Demon Man is probably the owner of that centipede. But, strong, not necessarily strong character work for Peter. I don't want to say Peter was taken out of the fight, more like he was inactive, but more on a defensive than on the offensive. Because he saves Gibbon, but he doesn't go out of his way to attack the Kraven bots, because that's something that Stegron would do. Peter is trying to gain his bearings in this issue, and I think that works very effectively because Peter has no idea what's going on. And in fact, he probably actually just woke up and was blindsided by Scorpion and the other villains. So for him to kind of pull back until he knows what he's dealing with makes a lot more sense than him just rushing in and trying to tear apart everything that moves. I also did enjoy how Vulture is a vulture. He appeals to Gibbon's nature of survival and his, I guess, not necessarily how he's mocked, but more that he gives Gibbon enough attention to appeal to him. and that allowed him to be more conniving. And I think that worked very effectively in this context. Centipede Demon Man, now that he's actually threatening the main love interest, that actually has genuine thing. I'm wondering if he's going to actually make a move in these issues as opposed to issue 24, considering how active he going for the main love interest of the hero is a very big move. I'm not sure he's actually going to do anything, but it does tell us that he's planning on making a move soon. Because my theory that I posted on the Crawl Space Discord is that Peter is going to propose to MJ in the 25th or 24th issue after Hunted is over. Given the hallucination he saw, it wouldn't be out of place for him to do it. And I'm kind of wondering if the reveal to Black Hat obviously accelerated his plans, because in issue 10 he kind of freaks out that Peter revealed his secret identity to Black Cat. But I'm not sure if he's just setting himself up to be a power player, or if he's actually going to make a move. But either way, he's actually in the book and he's got stakes now. So that's 3 out of 3 storylines that I have a genuine investment in. So good on Spencer for keeping me invested on all 3 running subplots. As I said, spectacular issue. I think there could have been some improvement on the art. I wish it had been Otley doing the art, but Ramos does a good job. Again, this is an issue where I think Ramos works much better in environments that require thick and heavy shading and really thick black line work, as opposed to really light open areas where it's just the line work and no shading. So yeah, solid A- for me. Let's move on to issue 18.HU, which is an issue focused on Le Gibbon. The book is written by Nick Spencer. Art is by Ken Lashley. So he did both the inks and he did both the pencils and the inks. And the colors are done by Eric Arsenidia. Or I don't know how to pronounce it. You know what? I'll post it in the live chat, and you can figure out how to pronounce it yourself. Arseniega? Maybe. I don't know. But the issue mainly focuses on the Gibbon as a child and moving into adulthood. And so it shows that because of his appearance, he was mocked as a child because of his monkey face. And so it comes back and forth to his past, going up until just before Hunted, and goes and also does into Hunted, where he's fighting the Craven bots that captured him in the last issue. And so it goes out of its way to show that that Gibbon gets dunked on no matter what he does. Because even here, the Craven bot / hunters, they don't even know what a Gibbon is. So he tries to negotiate, and fails. And so he runs away. His main option is to run away. And so he talks about how his place was always in the trees, or just in open nature. And so he gets a bunch of bullets pumped into him. And so it goes out of its way to show that the world was just terrible to Gibbon, because one of his bullies got a nice deal on Wall Street, started their own hedge fund, and he joined the circus because it was the only job he could get with his face. And he was, and it shows that he was would go out and run or go swinging at the going out the roof, and that's where he met Spider-Man. And so Spider-Man was something of inspiration to Gibbon, an opportunity, and always, and it kind of gave Gibbon someone to relate to, a partner. And so he tried to appeal to Spider-Man and say, "Hey, make me your sidekick," but Spider-Man made the mistake of laughing at him. And so Gibbon attacked him and became more or less a villain. Who it was, and my knowledge of the Gibbon is relatively limited compared to more knowledgeable Spider-Man fans. I know enough about him to know the basic gist of his backstory and that he's more or less a reluctant villain. So it doesn't really surprise me that it's more he just wants somewhere to belong, and that when Kraven the Hunter first found him, all the way back in, I believe, what was it? Like a long. It was back during. I don't even remember. But Kraven the Hunter found him and gave him a potion to make him stronger, and it essentially it hurt him, and it cuts back to Hunted, and using that as motivation, he starts thrashing the Kraven bots, or at the very least, he tries. It doesn't work out, but he doesn't. He gets shot up full of bullets, and it cuts back to him being bullied and back to him getting kicked to the ground. It very much parallels his life before he became the Gibbon, and it this one page, I'm going to show it because I don't usually show pages, but I think this one's very important because one of my crap. One of my problems with Tom King's art is that he really overuses the 9-panel grid page. This is one of the good examples of it because you have very good color mixing along with parallels in each of the panels to how they reflect. And so that's one of the problems with King's books is that he uses the 9-panel grid not as a way to convey parallel actions and how they conflate onto the page, but instead uses them to artificially lengthen his page count or to give him more room for dialogue. So in this sense, I think Lashley has a better understanding of how the theory of the 9-page spread works, especially considering how janky and out of place the dialogue is. And I think that was very deliberate on Spencer's part, and I like that because it shows it shows how Gibbon is getting hurt and how he's not really in a headspace to be thinking of coherent sentences, and it works. I don't hate Tom King, but it frustrates me that it took a side issue of Amazing Spider-Man for someone to get a 9-panel page correct and use the color theory to get it to actually work. It just frustrates me, but eventually Gibbon lies on the ground. He's going to die, and he wants to be left alone. That's all he wants. And so the Rhino is the only thing that saves him from dying, and they go and chase him and leave the Gibbon to essentially die. And he thinks back on his life and how he became a good guy with the Grizzly. Didn't stick, I think, but he was on his. But then Grizzly became a villain again, as villains do, and so he met Princess Python, and it not necessarily shows how much of a sucker Gibbon is, but how much he wants to be loved. That He was just willing to go along with her, and then they got married so that she could be on his insurance. And then they were happy until she actually got better. And then she left him for Livewire, it's funny because in Secret Adventures, I believe number 28, she went on to eat him with her or his snake or her snake did. And it shows that it's kind of tragic that Gibbon wasn't really surprised when she left, and that he can still remember her laughing when she got in the car and that he loved her laugh. It's very tragic in that sense, in that the most he could do was just sit and lie down until Taskmaster and Black Ant just scooped him up for no reason. And it shows her getting it kind of recaps back to the last issue of Hunted, where Gibbon is running away and sees Princess Python, but he doesn't get the chance because Spidey and Vulture both petition him to join him, and he chooses Vulture, and as he says himself, big mistake. And he gets struck with an arrow, I believe. Yeah, he gets struck with an arrow, and he falls over and crashes. And they look at him, and they're like, oh, and the hunters come over to him, and they don't even know what he is. They think he's pathetic, and they decide to do what the only thing they think they can do with an animal with this much pain. They shoot him to put him out of his misery. And I'm going to read this quote line for line because it's probably one of the most impactful pieces. There was one other thing I did. I almost forget about it sometimes because it felt so much like a dream. I got stuck through a portal into this other dimension where everybody was an ape. It had some big problems, but for me, I never felt better when I was just around all of them. Somewhere I wasn't a freak. Somewhere I wasn't alone. And I think that very much not necessarily stands out, but it's probably one of the best bits of dialogue that Spencer's ever written, or at least in this volume, because part of Gibbon's little struggle in this single issue was fitting in and belonging. And it not only does it confront the Marvel apes happened, but it shows that he was able to find somewhere where he wanted to be. And so the issue not necessarily ends, but Peter finds Gibbon dying, and Peter goes, "Why didn't you come with me?" And he wants to Gibbon apologizes inside of his head. You're supposed to give him some last words, keep him going. And he struggles to get those words out, and he can't even do it. And he just feels everything getting colder, and the issue ends with him saying, "Oh well, it's not all bad, I guess. At least nobody's laughing." And the issue ends with Peter holding a dead Gibbon in his arms. Know what? A+. I don't give a lot of books A+, but this book, this singular issue, is potentially one of the best of Nick Spencer's entire run, and it might be like the pinnacle of his run. I can't say for certain, but it definitely hits those high notes. And as I mentioned, it does a very good job of humanizing the Gibbon. It's probably one of the best characters he's ever written, aside from some of his other villains' characters. Not sure what else I can say other than it made me feel bad for ever laughing at the Gibbon, because it goes out of its way to show a person who was misunderstood and mocked all the time because of how he looked. And no matter how hard he tried to become a better person, he always kept going back to either being mocked or becoming a villain again because of how he looked. And this reflects that very much, in that he kept his head down. He even when he kept his head down, he got hurt because of it. And no matter what he did, he would always lose. And I think that's one of Spencer's best traits is that he can write good villains, make them either likable or unlikable, but still give them a degree of sympathy. Ken Lashley's art here, I enjoyed it. It was a little weird in some places, like that the page where Rhino is bashing through all the Hunter bots. That was a little weird, but other than that, I thought it was very well put together. And um, Lashley and Arsenigia, they understand how to mix current day stuff and flashbacks together. They understand ink and color theory, and I applaud them for that because it's kind of becoming a lost art where everyone just draws the figures but without shading. It's become a serious problem, I think, in the comics industry at this point. But I'm glad there are some people who understand appropriate use of ink and color. Um, Not much I can say other than it. This is probably one of the best that Spencer's ever written. If the rest of Hunted turns out this way, I would be more than willing to say that we are in good hands. Um, while I'm loading up ASM 19. Um, Next story time. This it's kind of I'm kind of shilling for myself, but yeah, I'm gonna say it. Story time is coming up eventually. I don't know when, but it'll come up soon. My plan is to tackle Superior Foes of Spider-Man, and then start reviewing Spencer's ASM or going through Spencer's ASM, maybe covering some other stuff that's not spider related. I kind of want to talk about More Than Meets the Eye, wrap up Marvel Knights Spider-Man, maybe talk about Rom versus Transformers because that's a good read. Either way, let me know in the comments or in the live chat. All right, so ASM number 19, written by Nick Spencer. Artist is Gerardo Sandoval, who, if you haven't read Robbie Thompson's Venom or Mike Costa's Venom, you'll have no idea who this guy is, because I didn't know where he came from either. And Edgar Delgado and Eric Arsenigia. I don't even know how to pronounce that still. They're the letters. So the issue begins with Black Cat comforting Billy Williams. Before Felicia does some bad touch, it cuts over to Craven Jr. and his dad. And so Craven Jr. is noticeably a little peeved because he set up this entire great hunt, brought all these animal-themed villains, only to let these basic white-ass hunters do his dirty work for him. And I have a feeling that's going to come up later, but Craven decides not to intervene yet. And Craven Jr. is clearly kind of confused by this, but he says, yeah, I'm going to handle it eventually. And so it cuts to Peter holding Gibbon's body. And it recaps for a bit. And he goes over the casualty list. And he even says, like, I don't even know how many bodies there are right now. And so Peter gets shot in the head by a rocket. Only gets knocked unconscious. After a bit of quipping, they try to take off their headsets, and then Peter webs them up and gets away. And the black suit does really help him in this situation. Eventually, he sees a bunch of arrows, and sees that they're a trail. And he notices that there's a pattern to them, and he eventually finds a bunch of the villains stuck together. So I can see here, I think that's Princess Python, White Rabbit, the Owl, Rhino, Armadillo, the Human Fly, I think, Toad, Constrictor, Stegron, it's Scorpia, the knockoff female scorpion, and Razorback. And for those of you who don't know who Razorback is, D-list supervillain. Vulture shows up and he says, "Yeah, you're all correct to be afraid. We're all screwed." And he twists the story about Gibbon to make it seem like Gibbon sacrificed himself to find a weakness for Vulture to exploit. And he makes it sound like Vulture and he worked together to find this weakness or destroy them. And Vulture basically uses him as a rallying cry. Spider-Man comes in and almost accidentally tears down the... It's kind of... Mark pointed this out in his review, and I'm going to point it out here just because he made an actually really good point, is that Peter almost ruined Gibbon's legacy, because the memory of what is essentially, to these guys, a loser was given a brave, heroic end by Vulture. And Peter almost kind of ruined that. But even though Peter makes some pretty good points about finding an escape plan and making a point that it's the Vulture who is probably one of the most duplicitous villains in the Marvel Universe. Vulture uses a Kraven bot head as proof that the Gibbon helped him. And this is a weird complaint that you're going to hear from me later, but I think Sandoval did some really weird work with the eyes. There's the page where Peter is recapping Taskmaster and Black Ant capturing Rhino. And you can see Peter's eyes, and they channel a lot of McFarlane, specifically the page where Venom first attacks Spidey. I think it was in Amazing number 300 or 301. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he clearly channels a lot of that issue. I'm not sure if it was a reference or if it was unintentional, but either way, it really caught my eye. And Rhino attacks Spidey for abandoning him, which I actually thought was a really good way of bringing old plot points back. Vulture stops him from killing Spider-Man, but they... Oh god, my throat is killing me. Yeah. But they rally together, and Peter kind of thinks, well, crap, we're kind of screwed now. So it cuts back to Black Cat, and TLDR, she uses her bad luck powers to break open the cage behind the guard and open it so a snow leopard can attack him. And I'm not sure how I feel about this, because while it's not necessarily out of character for Black Cat to use her bad luck powers like this, it's kind of weird to see her just so casually let a guy get mauled by a snow leopard. I'm not sure how I feel about it, because even then, Billy Connors is like, I just want to stay here. My dad will find me. Like, he's scared to go with Felicia. Then it cuts back to Arcade and Taskmaster in one of the gates. And it's revealed that Taskmaster caught the lizard, which will be covered in tomorrow's issue by Chi-Town. So go to the crawl space and check out his review tomorrow, or whenever he uploads it when you get the chance. And so it cuts back to Peter, who's thinking he's got to get out of this place and find MJ because of what the vision. And he gets assaulted by one of the Craven bots. And he almost destroys it, but when he's interrupted by Best Boy Black Ant. Rip, yeah, he's alive! A+! A+. Black Ant's alive. But he shrinks, and Black Ant ominously says, just trying to stop you from doing something you'll regret. It's time you learn the truth about this place. And that was issue 19. I'm gonna give this one a A. I'm gonna give it an A. This was a very solid piece of work. I know not a lot of people are a fan of Sandoval's work, and I shouldn't be one to talk because I talked about his Venom run. I didn't like his Venom, which is weird because I'm praising him now, but it felt like he was doing too much geometric lines, and he's still doing it here. But here it seems toned down to the point where it feels more conservative with how pointy it is. There's some weird pages. There's the panel where Peter is looking down at Black Ant shrunken. Black Ant's pointing at him. Peter's eye just looks really weird. Like it looks too much like Venom, if that makes any sense. Other than that, I did like it. I did enjoy his lizard though. That and his Taskmaster, they're very cool renders. If we got a lizard book or an arc dedicated to the lizard, I would be more than okay with Sandoval doing that, because those renders are actually very impressive. Again, I think Spencer did a really good job of juggling all the subplots. None of them are really slowing down, but none of them are really speeding up too much. There's 4 stories. There's the Black Cat story, the Vulture story, the Spidey story, and the I would count the Spider-Man and Vulture stories as one whole story, considering they're tied together. The Black Cat's the Craven storyline, because he's still trying to figure out what his dad's up. I guess his dad, or what exactly Craven's plan is. And I have a feeling that they'll tie together, and it'll be Craven 87. That's what we call him in the crawl space. Craven 87. He'll come in and screw everything up. I'm calling it now, because he's clearly lost his patience in the story with his dad. With his dad, I guess that's what we'll call him. We'll call him his dad. With his dad, not joining the hunt when he designed this magnificent run. So he's not going to put that to waste. He's probably going to go out and do something reckless and ruin the whole thing. I guarantee it. The MJ Sent a Demon subplot, I'm not sure. It feels like that one's kind of being put on the back burner until Peter manages to either find a way out of here, or until something comes into play where he needs to make himself known to Peter. Either way, not a lot to say about this issue, just because it's more an issue where the characters settle down and take the time to take stock of the situation, because the last 2 issues, aside from the Gibbon issue, have been focused mainly on establishing what's the actual plan is and putting into motion, and then the characters that aren't Craven reacting to it and running away. And this issue is them kind of simmering down to take stock of the situation and plan their next move. Peter wants to run and find a way out. The villains want to fight the Craven bots head on. I don't expect anything less from the mighty Stegron, but I'm kind of genuinely excited. I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. We've got the Lizard coming in issue 19.HU, which is tomorrow again. And then we've definitely got Craven 87 joining in on the hunt. But I'm genuinely curious to see what happens, just because Again, the stakes have been well presented. I'm just kind of I'm worried the story isn't going to go the way I want it to. Like I don't expect I expect Craven will probably die just because Craven Jr. is probably going to go psychopathic. And I imagine at least one of the Savage Six will die. I can't say which. I'm thinking it might be Vulture, considering the solicit for 20.HU has him uh basically dying. It doesn't hint at him dying, but he's clearly overconfident to a large degree, and I think that's gonna be what undoes him. And it might not die, but something's gonna happen to him. Um, Spidey. I mean, I've listed what I want him to do on the Crawl Space Discord. So if you want to see that, go to the Crawl Space. We got a link to the Discord, and my theory is posted on there. But again, not really much to say about this issue because it's very much a calm issue meant to kind of divide the subplots and take stock of the situation. So yeah, I'll give it an A. And we got 3 issues done under an hour. I think that's actually a pretty good stream. So we're gonna call it a day. And I don't know when the next stream will be, but I want it to be a story time. So either in the comment section, I might make a poll and put it in the comments section. But I want to know. I'd like to hear what you guys want to talk about. I've been considering not just doing Spidey story times, but also doing other story times. I've been considering doing the Jeff Loveness, Ramon Perez Nova run. It's one of the few good runs I think came out of the 2017 relaunch of Marvel, the all new Marvel Now 2.0. It was a very solid book that reintroduced Richard Rider to the Marvel universe, and I actually kind of want to talk about it. So if you guys would want to hear about it, yeah, I would totally do a story time with that book. So I think that'll close up today, but I don't remember the last time I did a stream. I actually really enjoyed tonight. I'll try to get a guest star on next time, considering this isn't a considering this is more or less a crawl space review. I kind of think it made more sense for me not to have a guest star, but maybe if I do Nova, and I'm planning on doing Nova at some point, but I'll try and get a guest star on next time. So until then, it's been Neil. Yeah. I reviewed some Spider-Man. I don't know what else you want me to say, but I reviewed some Spider-Man, and I will catch you guys next time. Why can't I end the hangout?